Hello everyone! I hope you're ready for another adventure, because today Wayne continues to read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Always remember that as we go along with these stories and dive into these amazing adventures, all you have to do, if you want to read along, is press the CC button and you'll be able to practice reading. Now, we love having Madame Owl back, and she is here to join us for another adventure. Are you ready to jump into this book, Madame Owl? Perfect. Madame Owl is all set, so let's jump in. Chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked away. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now, they knew what had been in the long, thin package that he had bought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." Then a pause. Then, smash! The door was hit with such force that it flung clean off the hinges. With a deafening crash, landed flat on the floor. A giant man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard, but you could make out his eyes glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his beard just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. "Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could ya? It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, you great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching terrified behind Uncle Vernon. "And here's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw the beetle eyes were crinkled with a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "You look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mom's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny raspy noise. "I demand that you leave at once, sir. You are breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot as easy as if it had been made out of rubber, and threw it into the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trotted on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back to the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. Got summit for you here. I might have sat on it at some point. It'll taste all right." From the inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling feelings. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but words got lost in his throat, and what he said instead was, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of the keys of grounds in Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea then, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. "I'd not say no ter somewhat stronger if you got in mind." His eyes fell on the empty grate with the shriveled crisp bags in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but he drew back a second later. There was a roaring fire in it. It filled the damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash all over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of his pockets in his coat. A copper kettle, a squashy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid that he took a swig out of before starting to make the tea. Soon the hut was full of sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the 6 fat, juicy, slightly unburnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little bit. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great puddin' of a son don't need fatting anymore, Dursley. Don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was so hungry he never tasted anything so wonderful. But still, he couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and widened his mouth with the back of his hands. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm the keeper of the keys at Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," said Harry quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them who should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought that you wouldn't know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Did you never wonder where your parents learned it all?" "All what?" "All what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now just wait 1 second." He leapt to his feet, and anger seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were crying against the wall. "Do you mean to tell me," he growled at the Dursleys, "that this boy, knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought this was going a bit too far. He had been to school after all, and his first marks weren't bad. "I know some things," he said. I can, do math and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved a hand and said, "About our world. I mean, your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked like he was about to explode. "Dursley!" he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gotten very pale, whispered something that sounded like Mimblewimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must know about your mom and your dad. I mean, they're famous. You're famous." "What? My mom and dad weren't famous, were they?" You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. "You don't know what ye are," he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. "Stop!" he commanded. "Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell the boy anything." A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every symbol trembled with rage. "You never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley. And you've kept it from him all these years." "Kept what from me?" said Harry eagerly. "Stop! I forbid you!" yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gasped in horror. Go bulge your beards, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard." There was a silence in the hut. Only the sea and the sound of whistling wind could be heard. "I'm a what?" gasped Harry. "A wizard, of course," said Hagrid, sitting down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. "And a thumping good 'un, I'd say, once you've been trained up a bit. With a mom and dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter." Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea. He pulled out the letter and read, "Hogwarts, School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore. Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sork, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederate of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins September 1. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours truly, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Head Mistress." Questions exploded inside Harry's mind like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, "What does it mean, they await my owl?" "Galloping Gorguts, that reminds me," said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse, and from yet another pocket in his overcoat pulled an owl, a real, live, rather ruffled-looking owl, a long quill, and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. Dear Professor Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you're well. Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clambered in its beak, went to door, and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he walked back and sat down as though it was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid. But at that moment, Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. He's not going, he said. Harry grunted. I'd like to see a muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Said Hagrid, interested. A muggle, said Hagrid, is what we call non-magic folk like them. And it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in we'd stop all this rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. We swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed. You knew, said Harry. You knew I'm a wizard? Knew? Shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. Knew? Of course we knew. How could we not be? My dratted sister being all that she was. Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in the family. She stopped to draw her deep breath and then went on ranting. It seemed she had been wanting to say this for years. Then she met that Potter at school, and they left and got married and had you. And of course, I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you. Harry had gone very white. As soon as he found his voice, he had said, Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash. Car crash? Roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back into their corner. How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? That's an outrage. A scandal. Harry Potter not knowing his own story when every kid in our world knows his name. But why? What happened? Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. I never expected this, he said in a low, worried voice. I had no idea. When Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting a hold of you, how much you didn't know. And Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's gotta. You can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing. He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it. He sat down, stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, It begins, I suppose, with a person called... But it's incredible you don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows. Who? Well, I don't like saying a name if I can help it. No one does. Why not? Gulp and gargoyles, Harry. People are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad. As bad as you could go. Worse than worse. His name was... Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. Could you write it down? Harry suggested. Nah, can't spell it. All right. Voldemort. Hagrid shuddered. Don't make me say it again. Anyways, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for fellers. Got 'em too. Some were afraid. Some just wanted a bit of his power, 'cause he was getting himself power all right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust. Didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taken over. Of course, some stood up, and he killed him. Horribly. Oh, the only safe place left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you-know-who was afraid of. Didn't dare try taking the school, not just then anyway. Now, your mom and dad were a good witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is why you-know-who never tried to get too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade him. Maybe he just wanted him out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you all was living on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to the house and Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. Sorry, he said, but it's that sad. Knew your mom and dad, nice people you couldn't find. Anyway, you know who killed him, and this is the real mystery of all things. He tried to kill you too. Wanted to make a clean job of it, I suppose. Or maybe he just liked killing by then. But he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that mark on your forehead? That's no ordinary cut. That's what you get when a powerful, evil curse touches you. Took care of your mom and dad and your house even, but it didn't work on you. And that's why you're famous, Harry. No one ever lived after he decided to kill him. No one except you. And he killed a whole some of the best witches and wizards in the age, and the McKinnons, and the Bones, and the Pruitts, and you was only a baby, and you lived. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw again the blinding flash of green light, more clearly than he had ever remembered it before. And he remembered something else. For the first time in his life, a high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid watched him sadly. Took leave from the ruined house myself, on Dumbledore's orders. Brought you to this lot. Load of old tosh, said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped, and had almost forgotten the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have gotten back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid, his fists were clenched. Now you listen here, boy, he snarled. I accept there's something strange about you. Probably nothing a good beating wouldn't have cured. And as for all this about your parents, well, they were weirdos, no denying it. And the world's better off without them, in my opinion. As for all they got, getting mixed up with these wizarding types, just as I expected, they always knew they'd come to a sticky end. But at that moment, Hagrid left from the sofa and drew out a battered pink umbrella from his coat, pointing it at Uncle Dursley's like a sword. He said, I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm warning you. One more word. In danger of being spread out at the end of an umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. That's better, said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back into the sofa, which this time sagged right down to the floor. Harry, meanwhile, still had questions to ask, hundreds of them. But what happened to you-know-who? Good question, Harry. Disappeared, vanished. Same night, tried to kill you. Makes ye even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, you see. He was getting more and more powerful. Why'd he go? Some say he died. Cold swallop, in my opinion. Don't know if he had enough human left to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time, I don't know if I believe it. People who was on his side came back to ours. Some of them came out of kind of traces. Most of us reckon he's still out there, somewhere, but lost all his powers. Too weak to carry on. 'Cause something about you finished him, Harry. There was something going on that night he hadn't counted on. I don't know what it was. No one does. But something about you stumped him all right. Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect blazing in his eyes, but Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure that it was a horrible mistake. A wizard? Him? How could he possibly be? He spent his life being clodded by Dudley and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If he was really a wizard, Why hadn't they been turned into warty toads every time they tried to lock him up in his cupboard? If he'd once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? Hagrid, he said quietly, I think you must have made a mistake. I don't think I can be a wizard. To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled. Not a wizard, Harry. Never made things happen when you was scared or angry? Harry looked into the fire. Now he came to think about it. Every odd thing that had ever made his aunt and uncle furious with him, what happened when Harry, had been upset or angry, chased by Dursley's gang, when he had somehow found himself out of their reach, dreading going to school with that ridiculous haircut, but he managed to make it grow back, and the very last time Dudley had hit him, hadn't he gotten his revenge without realizing what he was doing? Hadn't he set a boa constrictor on him? Harry looked back at Hagrid, smiling, and saw that Hagrid was positively beaming at him. See, said Hagrid, Harry Potter, not a wizard. You wait. You'll be right famous at Hogwarts. But Uncle Vernon wasn't going to give in without a fight. Haven't I told you he's not going? He hissed. He's going to Stonewall, and he'll be grateful for it. I've read those letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish. Spellbooks and wands, and if he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him, growled Hagrid. Stop Lily and James Potter's son from going to Hogwarts? You're mad. His name has been down ever since he was born. He's off there, the finest school of witchcrafts and wizards in the world. 7 years there, and he won't know himself. He'll be with youngsters of his own sort, for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster ever, Albus Dumbledore. I am not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks, yelled Uncle Vernon. But he had finally gotten too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella and whirled it over his head. Never, he thundered, insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me. He brought the umbrella swishing down through the air to point at Dudley. There was a flash of violet light, a sound made like a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and the next second, Dudley was dancing on the spot with his hands clasped to his flat bottom, howling in pain. Then he turned his back to them. Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking out from under a hole in his trousers. Uncle Vernon roared, pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room. He cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind them. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard. Shouldn't have lost me temper, he said ruefully. But it didn't work anyway. Meant to turn him into a pig. But I suppose he was also just like a pig anyway. There wasn't much left to do. He cast a sideways look at Harry under his bushy eyebrows. Be grateful if you didn't mention that to anyone at Hogwarts, he said. I'm, not supposed to do magic, strictly speaking. I was allowed to do it for a bit, getting the letters to you and stuff. One of those reasons I was so keen to take the job. Why aren't you supposed to use magic? Said Harry. Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, and I got expelled, to tell you the truth. In me 3rd year. They snapped me wand in half and everything. But Dumbledore let me stay on at the gamekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore. Why were you expelled? It's getting late, and we've got tons of work tomorrow, said Hagrid loudly. Gotta get you to town, get your books and all that. He took off his black coat and threw it to Harry. You can keep under that, he said. Don't mind if it wriggles a bit. I think I still got a couple of dormice in the pockets. Wow, that was a really cool chapter and a great adventure to go on. I wonder what's going to happen to that pigtail of Dudley. What do you think's going to happen in the next chapter, Madam Owl? I'm hoping so. I'll see you next time. And we'll see you next time here with Wayne Reads. Thank you for joining us. We can't wait to see you on the next adventure here with Harry Potter. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.